Oh, that's great. You're all quiet straight away. Brilliant. I have the power up here. I'll try and not let it go to my head. So, can you hear me quite clearly at the back? Yeah? Okay. Okay. Yes, I'll get to the middle. That's better. Okay, welcome. Welcome all. Welcome if you're here in person. Welcome if you're listening on the live stream. I know it's been tricky to get here with all the engineering works, but thank you. I'm just going to go through the housekeeping before we begin. Obviously, fire alarms, it's not going to go off while I'm here. It definitely won't. There are signs to the nearest exit, and the meeting point is at Bertrand Russell Square, in the garden of the Red Lion Square there. It's the bust of the said man. So hopefully the fire alarms will not be going off. The toilets, including the accessible ones, are on the ground floor. They're to the right. And please, can I ask absolutely no filming or photos without permission during this event for safety and security reasons. This is being live streamed. So if you do not want to be seen, there's a possibility if you're near the front and you get up, you could be caught on the live stream. So if you don't want that happening, please sit nearer to the back. We've asked any journalist and professional photographers to respect this and avoid capturing any image of anybody's face without explicit permission. Now, we'd love to get a discussion going, so if you're on Twitter, please tweet away at #BreakingTheCycle. Please look at the capitalizations. There is free Wi-Fi, which you can access, so please do so. At the end of the afternoon and morning session, there will be questions and discussions. So please submit questions as you go along. We've got this device called Slido, which the information is going up there. Please make your questions short and sweet, and please make sure you know which panel you're addressing it to. You can do this anonymously. You don't need to put your name. That's absolutely fine. We will be choosing questions from Slido and also taking questions from the floor with our roving mics. Now, the nature of this conference, it may be distressing. Some of the stuff that you hear will be quite difficult. It's not intended to be gratuitous. It is what it is. It's the nature of what we're talking about. We understand if you may feel overwhelmed, you can go out, take some air, take a rest. There's a cafe. We've also got volunteers. They've got the purple badges. You may go to them and they can escort you out. We understand. It's okay. Lunch is about 1:05-ish, or a bit later because we've had a little late start. There's a quick overview of the program there. And I'll be just setting the scene why we're doing this conference. We are living through a rise in male violence against women, girls, and children, and much of it's sexual violence. And there's little doubt it's getting worse. Okay, so we've got some statistics here, which, when I looked at them, it was difficult to comprehend, really. The first slide, it shows for England and Wales, the recorded rapes have gone up in 20 years by 300%. 300%. And that can't be explained away by the changes in how rapes are recorded. I found that astounding. For the next slide, if you have a look at that, we've got 9% of women over the age of 15. 9% were victims of domestic abuse. And the year before that, on the next slide, over 89,000 child sex abuse offences were recorded. A third were rape or sexual violence. To the next slide, please. Shockingly, recent survey, it was shocking, really shocking to me. 1 out of 10 men admitted to child sexual offences, most of which weren't recorded by the police. So just let that sink in. In the next slide, women involved in prostitution are at greater risk. Pimps and sex buyers subject them to staggering amounts of violence and abuse, both physical, emotional, and sexual. And to put it bluntly, they're at the greater risk of being murdered. We know that females can commit offences against adults and children, but we also know the vast majority of sex offenders are committed by men. Next slide, please. And thank you to Claire Dimian, for her research and analysis and graphics that make it quite clear and easy to digest, because I'm not quite a mathematician, so this really helps me. So the official data in England and Wales, Scotland, Ireland, the EU and the US, 99% of the people convicted of sexual offences are male. 88% offended females, okay? This data is similar in most other developed countries. So we're witnessing serious social problems here. Measures are being taken place by the government have little to no impact. For example, it's quite laughable actually, but one big idea was to tackle male violence was to improve street lighting in notorious areas. Street lighting. So they weren't actually thinking about the structural problems there. So whilst this was welcomed, it really doesn't address the real problem of the drivers of male violence against women and children. So we are stating that violence is a cultural phenomenon. It's not innate. We're not saying that men are predisposed to violence. We believe it's a learned behaviour, and it persists because it's condoned and protected by political and cultural forces. And the key to the culture is this exploitation industry. That's pornography and prostitution. Now, we've got no hope of putting a dent into this epidemic of male violence against women and children unless we tackle pornography and prostitution. We've got to address it head on, because things will not change if it's not. However, we do believe changes are possible. They won't be easy. It's going to take determination, grit. Cultural change has happened before, sometimes rapidly. It can happen again. So this is what the conference is about. It's about understanding the links between violence, pornography, and prostitution, and how we can bring about change. Now, please join me in welcoming our panellists. Come on up, panellists.
Hi everyone, my name is Fiona Broadfoot. I'm here to talk about my own lived experience of being trafficked into the sex trade as a girl, and the work that I do now to offer a safe, female-only space to girls and young women affected by sexual violence and abuse. For those of you who haven't heard me speak, I've been speaking a lot of years now. In fact, I'm exhausted, absolutely exhausted, but it's worse than one could ever imagine it were going to be. I was so naive 28 years ago when I first shared my lived experiences that we would eradicate the sex trade once I started to speak out. Not in my wildest nightmares did I imagine we would be in the state we're in today. So I had the misfortune to meet a man who was a pimp. I had childhood sexual abuse experiences, but I was so young. I was a baby. Before I was 2. And how the brain works and how we shut these things down is, I don't know, it's just beyond me. But I eventually had very vivid memories many years after being abused. Nothing was ever done with the perpetrator. He was in the family. He eventually perpetrated against somebody else in the family, and she did send him, have him charged, and he got put on a programme. And as long as he wasn't unsupervised around children, he could see his grandchildren and whoever else he wanted to see. He's dead now, so don't have to worry about him, but I know for a fact he'll have gone on and perpetrated probably till the end of his days, because they do. And then consequently, people turn inside out, girls and young women who have experienced sexual violence. And there are a lot of young women and adult women in the sex trade who have had childhood sexual abuse, but it's not, it's not all have, but we're all groomed well and truly into this porn culture. Gail Dines, I know she's going to give a presentation later, she talks about girls being porn ready, and I work with these girls now, politicise them, talk about feminism, talk about the patriarchy, and they're amazing young women, absolutely amazing young women, and hopefully, not on my watch, will they be groomed into this hell. 15 years of age, I was being fucked sideways 10 times a day by different men, all nice men, really nice men. And we still excuse it. We excuse it relentlessly. I'm done with being polite about this. I really am. Because every single week you hear another murder, another rape, another assault. The girls I work with, 6-year-old going through court, being cross-examined by a bloke in a wig who I don't trust them. I don't trust any of them. I think they're all potential perverts and rapists without a shadow of a doubt. Boys and young men are getting more and more confident in their abuse with girls and young women when they're having relationships. Sexual violence is so normalised, so acceptable, and the girls daren't say no, daren't challenge it. They're terrified of these young men. And we just accept it. We just accept it. I had a phone call the other week from a mum, absolutely distraught, 7 o'clock in the morning. Her daughter had just disclosed that she has one-to-one from a male teacher. She's a survivor of sexual violence, and he told her that he thought her ass looked good in the tracksuit she had on. She didn't tell her mum straight away. It was months later that she told her mum, because her mum said, "Why don't you wear that tracksuit anymore for school?" And she told her. She phoned the school. The school called her in for a meeting. She went to the meeting, and they told the female head said, "Don't worry, he won't work with her again." But they did nothing, absolutely nothing about him. She's since talked to me about other things he said, which have all gone in a report to safeguarding, all of it. Nothing has been done about it. And that's just one example, one girl. I work, I live in a small city in Bradford. I work with as many girls as I can, but it's overwhelming, the amount of girls who are, they hate themselves, they absolutely hate themselves, thanks to social media and the way that, bloody lips and ass and all this shite. They all have mental health problems, they all have anxiety, they arrive at my door terrified, absolutely terrified. And thankfully, I will maintain a female safe space. I'm not, no way am I gonna change that. No chance, no chance. When I got into the sex trade, you were criminalised as a girl. The men and boys, the pimps, the buyers have never, ever been held accountable. And now we're in the mess that we are, and OnlyFans is a job option for our young women. Again, not on my watch, no chance. We have to start holding accountable the perpetrators. We need the Nordic model, equality model, it's also known as. Once you have been violated so much, like the bloody grand old Duke of York, I've had 10,000 men, you do not ever, ever recover, never. You are maimed for life, you are shattered for life. And, my cousin were murdered. That's what gave me the voice. Had she not have been murdered, I probably would have been. But it made me leave the sex trade. It's there's no exiting services, or there are few, I beg your pardon, there are a few now, but nowhere near what we need. I have phone calls every week from adult women surviving this nonsense, this hell, and I just can't believe that. Sometimes I just don't even know what to say anymore in this shit world. I just thank you for doing this conference, as always. I could quote statistic, I could do all of that, but you know what? Men, if you're watching online, if you're in the room, stop it. Just stop it and call out the other men. Call them out. We cannot carry on like this. I always rant. I just rant because I just rant. Sorry. But thank you.
There we are. Good morning. Privileged to be here. My name is Michael Sheath. I worked as a probation officer for about 11 years, mostly with sexual offenders, and then I worked for the Lucy Faithful Foundation and Stop It Now for 25 and a half years, and that was primarily dealing with online offenders in the end, men who view child sexual abuse material. And I want to talk briefly about what I think are the overlapping constructs in child sexual abuse material and what we'll laughingly call mainstream pornography. Because my experience in the last 5 or 6 years is that mainstream pornography has become increasingly extreme and deviant and frankly depraved. And many of the men, almost all of the men I dealt with who've been arrested and convicted for possession of child sexual abuse material also had a fairly significant habit of viewing pornography. But they said, it's just the ordinary stuff, it's just the mainstream stuff, nothing weird. And I really want to emphasize the fact that a significant amount of easily accessible mainstream pornography is anything but ordinary or glamorous or fun times and so forth. So that's what I'll be talking about this morning. I've always wanted in life to say, next slide, please. So, next slide, please. There we go. Why don't we call child sexual exploitation material child porn or child pornography or kiddie porn? Because we don't. Because that's insulting to the children who are in the picture. Children in child sexual abuse material have been sexually exploited and raped and abused by persons for their own entertainment, but also for, frankly, the entertainment of others. So going back to 2000 or thereabouts, Interpol suggested that we ought to conceive of CSEM or CSAM as resulting from the consequence of exploitation or sexual abuse perpetrated against a child. So essentially, you can't have child sexual exploitation material without children being sexually exploited. That's not possible. At the heart of every image of CSAM is a child's experience of sexual abuse or rape. That is unambiguously the case. The second construct is really interesting from a kind of linguistic point of view. So what is it? Well, it can be defined as any means of depicting or promoting. Well, obviously, depicting is showing. So, of course, child sexual abuse material depicts, shows the sexual exploitation and abuse of children for the entertainment of the viewer. But the second word is really interesting because it also suggests that it promotes. And I think that's a really important psychological construct. The viewer of child sexual abuse material is presented with a relatively coherent ideological construction about how children are and how children should be and what the rights of children are versus the rights of the viewer, typically men. So there's a whole ideological underpinning which is not incoherent. It's coherent. It makes no sense at one level, but it holds together in a kind of ideological point of view as to what the purpose of children is. And the purpose of children in CSAM is to entertain the viewer or to arouse the viewer or to captivate the viewer. So there's that notion. And then when you think, well, what about mainstream pornography? I'll put inverted commas around it really. What does mainstream pornography do? Well, at many levels, mainstream pornography depicts the sexual exploitation of women. And at many levels also, it promotes the sexual exploitation of women because it suggests that women are a certain thing and it's a certain object, really. Women are reduced to genitalia or sexual acts, just as in CSAM, children are reduced to genitalia or sexual acts. They're not real persons. They're a kind of cipher, just kind of part of themselves, again, for the entertainment of the observer. Next one, please. I don't know if there are any police officers in the room, but if anyone is a police officer in the room, or just using your own judgment, if you came across a person who was viewing pornography and he was viewing these titles, he downloaded films with these titles, what would we make of him? I'll read them out briefly. Boyfriend forced GF girlfriend for sex. Auntie grabs the nerdy boy's virginity. Teen used and abused part 2, presumably there's a part 1. Daddy, I Don't Want to Go to School. Now, this is a pornographic title. It's not a documentary, it's a pornographic title. Daddy, I Don't Want to Go to School. What is the plot going to be thereafter? Beach spy changing room, 2 girls. Well, beach spy changing room is voyeurism, which is a crime. Daddy keeps effing daughter till she likes it. Now, it would be very easy to conclude that the person collecting or viewing these titles would have his collar felt by the police, but in fact, he won't, because these are all titles that are found on mainstream pornography sites, and the viewer can watch them and enjoy them and watch them again and send them to his friends without any prospect whatsoever of anybody taking an interest in him, because the sites are legal. Next slide. Hugely indebted to the work of Fiona Gray and colleagues, erstwhile of Durham, now I think London somewhere. What they did was they looked at the titles of videos, and there were 131,738. So they looked at the titles of videos that were offered on the most popular mainstream pornography sites in the UK. Pornhub and Xhamster, and another one called Xvideo. Now, Pornhub and Xhamster are now owned, almost hilariously, by an organisation called Ethical Capital Partners. I just think they must be having a laugh, essentially, calling themselves that, but that's what they're called. And Pornhub especially is the subject of an enormous number of lawsuits in the United States by people saying that their footage, the images of them, were stolen, that they were stolen from them. They were intimate images that were sold and monetised on Pornhub. And I think it's probably true. So what the researchers did was they did not view the films. They collated the titles of the films and looked through them for what our World Health Organization categorizations of sexual violence. So they were looking in the title for, what might be problematic about these titles. And the second thing was they didn't go looking. They just arrived on the landing page of the sites, legal sites. They arrived on the landing page and they were served up a menu of possibilities. And the titles I'm going to mention are from those possibilities. Next slide. 4 categories of sexual violence. One is essentially incest. Incest is obviously a form of sexual violence. Second is physical assault, beating, and so forth. Third is image-based. We have a crime of voyeurism in the United Kingdom, spying and so forth. And the fourth is coercion, exploitation, and so forth. So the key words they were looking for, and there were like 50 key words for each category. I've just quoted a couple of them here. So in terms of sexual activity between family members, we have auntie, daughter, dad, mom, stepmom, brother, sister, etc. And that word would appear in the title. And if it appeared in the title, they counted it. Typical story here. When mom's mad, dad goes to his daughter. What exactly does that mean? And what do we imagine the plot of the film that follows might be? They didn't watch the films. The second notion is aggression, assault, violence. And the words are around groping, molest, kick, punch, choke, hit, destroy, strangle, wreck. That kind of language, which to my ear isn't terribly romantic or sexual, but there it is. It's a form of sexual violence. Meth hurt wife, throat and pounded by dealer. And we must realize that someone looks at that title and goes, oh yeah, I'll watch that. That looks interesting, because the title is meant to capture the viewer. Now, as an aside, there were remarkably few titles that suggested nice man and nice lady have a nice time. Why? Because people don't click it. Pornhub gives the same title to a number of videos. It's the same video, it's exactly the same footage, the same activities. But if it titles it with something more interesting than romance or even consent, fewer people click on it. So viewers, it's men, viewers are being schooled and kind of conditioned to look for material that's violent, that's dangerous, and so forth. Image-based abuse, upskirted in the train, which is a criminal offence. I've dealt with men who've been arrested and convicted for doing exactly that. But here, well, it's not really obscurted in the train. It's just people pretending to obscure someone in the train. They're all consenting. They're all having a laugh. It's just filmed footage. But it's not necessarily the suggestions that some of the obscuring material and the hidden camera, spy camera, leaked footage, some of that material, it's not consensual at all. It's been stolen. It's illegal material that people are finding interesting. And then finally, stuff around coercion, exploitation, language of very young, teen, schoolgirl, helpless, drunk, drugged, asleep. Those kind of words were key in the study. And there's our offering, which ticks all the boxes for sexism, racism, abuse, and so forth. Chubby Spanish teen needs the cash. Now, it's a pornography site. So why does the teen need the cash? And what is the teen going to do for the cash? Presumably, we discover this when we watch the film. Next, please. When I was a probation officer, we used to give people questionnaires. And they fill in the questionnaire, and it would be kind of women are asking for it, women wearing short skirts deserve to get raped, yada, yada. And they would get a relatively high score, and we would see them as deviant, and this is a problem, and they have deviant schema. The way they see the world is faulty and needs to be addressed in treatment. So schema drive behavior. Everyone has schema. Most of our schema are functional. Some people's schema allow for rape and abuse because they see the world in a slightly different way from other people. So there's 7 primary schema for sexual offenders and sexual crime, but I'll just take 2 of them. And one is a word that's entered the language it's in common use, and it's entitlement. An entitlement schema suggests to the rapist, to the sexual offender, to the viewer of pornography, that because he is a man, and because he is an adult, he can essentially do what he wants. Adulthood, masculinity, confers upon him a sort of imperialistic right to do what he wants to other people. And the other people are going to be children and women. So men with a profound entitlement schema will rape, and they will view pornography, and they will view child abuse material, and they will do so in the comforting knowledge that their rights to arousal are more important than somebody else's rights to dignity, or to a life without fear, or to an absence of anxiety, and so forth. Because essentially, they're more important than other people. And that's a profound driver for so many of the men I've worked with. And when we're dealing with child sexual abuse material, they say, oh, well, I was a bit bored, and I felt a bit sad, and I was frustrated in my marriage, or I was getting on badly at work, and therefore I did that. And it's kind of a form of compensation for what they see as their difficulties in their daily life. And the second one is slightly more complex. It's what's called dangerous world, but it's essentially, it's the incel view, really, that women conspire. I don't know where they do this, but apparently they do. They meet together somewhere. Tell me where and I'll join in. Women conspire to do terrible things to men, to reject men, to frustrate men, to make men annoyed and angry. And they're hostile and they're capricious. They change their mind. They say no when they mean yes, and so forth. And they reject, and they do that gleefully and willfully as a means of putting men down. So what's men's response to that? Well, they must engage in preemptive strikes. They must use violence. They must use trickery. They must sometimes use seduction, or they just pay in terms of sex trade and so forth. But also in terms of pornography, they dominate women through their viewing. And it connects to Thomas Hobbes, 1640 odd, who talks about the state of nature. Well, every man's hand is against another. Well, in this, all men's hands are against women, and also against children. And Heather Woods, who's written a fantastic article, see me later if you want it, on the 3 drivers of engagement with extreme pornography and child abuse material. But I also think it attaches to quite a significant amount of mainstream pornography. And this is about control. You can watch it when you want. You can watch it when you're sad. You can watch it when you're angry. It never says no, does it? You've captured the imagery, and you can watch it and replay it and so forth whenever you want to. Strangely, you hold the desired object in contempt. So the woman in pornography is both arousing and exciting, but she's also an object of contempt and dismissal and abuse, hence the language that attaches to women in that position. And finally, there's a feeling of triumph. It connects to imperialism in a way and dangerous world theories, that you can take control over this person because you're kind of invading what would typically be an intimate moment. You're kind of stamping all over it and putting yourself in there. And when people talk about porn stars and they talk about children who are subject to child sexual exploitation, it doesn't take much for the language of contempt to begin to feature in the discourse about both women and children in those situations. Another slide, and the final one. Okay. People talk about the slippery slope between pornography and child sexual abuse material, and people like to think that they're two distinct worlds. If you had a Venn diagram, remember those from school, we have a Venn diagram with pornography in the nice tidy circle and child abuse material in another nice tidy circle with nothing connecting them. No, they overlap in constructs, in ideology, in the impact they have on the viewer, and also the ideological view that the person has. They are coterminous. They're thinking about the same thing: subjugation, use of violence, triumph, control, contempt, and so forth. It is fascinating how children, and it's correct that children are seen as worthy of protection by the state, except at the school that was just mentioned, that children are worthy of protection of the state, and we are aghast at individuals who collect child sexual abuse material, and we decry them and we abuse them, and okay, that's a possibility. We don't say anything at all about women. That a child can be subject to state protection at 17, but at 18 she's fair game. She's in play. She can be, taken advantage of. Thank you. And there's that almost fetishization of the innocence of children, except when they're innocent, but also the throwing to the walls of adult persons because, well, they're adults and they can say no and they can protect themselves and they shouldn't have let themselves get into that, and so on. Essentially, victim blaming. Finally, what's happening to boys who are viewing unfettered pornography on their smartphones from the ages these days of 6, 7 or 8? I used to say, good Lord, they're viewing it when they're 12, but that was 10 years ago. They're now viewing it as soon as they get smartphones, and they're aping the ideology of the mainstream pornography industry, which is cruel, misogynistic, and exploitative. That's my final word. Mainstream pornography depicts and promotes sexual violence. It's not just adult entertainment. Thank you. Thank you. I'm asked to hand over to Roxy Roots. Thank you.
Hello. So I'm Roxy Roots. I'm a survivor of digital sexual exploitation. It all began, like so many stories, with childhood sexual exploitation, which was interfamiliar, and unfortunately I didn't get treatment or I didn't get a chance to kind of heal. I grew up in Germany as well, so grew up in this liberal prostitution normalizing society. I'm born 89, so when I was a teenager, pornography was already part of, growing up, the early internet pornography. And as so many survivors of childhood sexual exploitation, I try to heal, or I try to get over my aversion to sexuality and to male bodies by actually seeking it out, by being, as you would say, hypersexual. I was in relationships from 13 onwards. I was also using drugs, and I was literally clearly traumatized, and there's many situations that I think about where I was in school, where I was around adults, and I didn't get the help. I was clearly not well. I was, I didn't, like growing up, basically, I was in like the punk scenes, like alternative scenes. I was taking drugs, drinking, being a misfit, an outlaw, and I kind of felt like this, and I felt like an alien for most of my life, like literally looking around and being like, this is a weird planet, and I don't really understand anything that's going on here. But you still are affected by everything that's surrounding you. So I thought I was on the right path when I decided not to demonize sexuality and open myself up to the possibility of, having relations with men. Any relationship that I had from 13 onwards was abusive, and I just endured, and I just performed. I just validated myself through holding a man because I performed the stuff that I thought he would want. From my adulthood, I never managed to keep a job for longer than a year. I was unable to deal with authority. Thinking back, I know it's men treating you like shit, and me literally not being able to handle this. I was like, no, I'm not gonna be another number in the system and being treated and disrespected in that way. So after many years of, one job after the other, many jobs, I'm actually really good. Like, I can work, I can do all of these things, but just not stick through abuse and disrespect. And in 2017, after traveling a lot, I was in Ireland, I was living in Brighton, Bristol. I basically met a photographer who was also an editor for the porn industry in London. And through him, it was the first time that I heard about this industry where women out-earn men. You get like £50 an hour for just modeling in lingerie and stuff. And I was like, oh, that's cool. Back then, I was very alternative, and again, it was 2017, so mainstream pornography has been going on, or the internet pornography that we know of has been going on since 2007 in that increasing level of insanity and depravity. And there was this whole thing about, there's a space, there's a niche for every woman, like whatever way you look like, if you're a muscular, alternative, kind of butch-looking woman, you can be, successful. There's a space for everyone. So that's how I entered as a model. I wanted to just model, and then I learned about OnlyFans. This was 2018, which is when I opened my account. This was the lie that I fell for, is you can sell yourself authentically, whatever way you look like, you just make the rules, you sell your content, and it's gonna be fine. Just as an explanation, the digital exploitation industries have been developing alongside the tube sites with webcam sites that have been going on for like maybe 18 years now, like close to 2007, 8. They have already been established, and so I started with OnlyFans and webcam. The webcam industries, or the webcam sites, they have already been established. Men have already been seeking them out, and the difficult thing about them is the webcam industry takes a cut of like 30 to 60% for the women that are on these sites. The good thing about it is that they make you searchable, so you appear on the front side, you can be found. Still doesn't change the fact that taking 60%, sometimes 70% is just insane. And then OnlyFans came on the market in 2017 and was obviously a big player, since they have started with this 20% cut. So you would take 80% home. The thing is, OnlyFans doesn't advertise you anywhere. There is no front page, so the models that are on this site and on any other site that followed afterwards are usually not to be found. So they're highly reliant on their own advertisement. And in order to make money, you basically have to put your link everywhere. So they will be on TikTok, they'll be on YouTube, they'll be on Twitter, on Instagram, on any social media platform, on seeking arrangement, on Snapchat, anywhere where they can put their link. It's necessary to even be seen. Alongside that come clip sites like Pornhub and other sites that also take 20 to 40% where you put advertising clips. So in order to be seen, in order to make money, any money, you have to be reliant on being online 100% of the time, like 100% of the day. There is just no chance. When OnlyFans was founded, it was originally founded as a site to have contact with already known porn stars, as they call them, which obviously developed alongside this tube site overrun industry, and the founder saw a market and a niche in that, have personal contact, but obviously knowing, just taking lots of money of men who are obsessed with objectifying and, obsessing over certain women. So this is how it started, but as time went on, as I said, 2018, 2019, the site became more and more known. So now it wasn't only porn performers, but it was also just normal women that saw an opportunity in making money, being themselves. What none of the women actually realize is that there is no you create your own persona. Whatever way you look like, the porn industry, the mainstream porn industry has already created niches and boxes that you fit in. So whatever way you look like, you are going to be put in that box. There is no way of you selling yourself the way that, or showing yourself the way that you want to. So I thought I could create like an artsy, I'm an artist, freelance artist. I studied that and whatever. And I was like, I can, make myself look good and whatever. No one cared, literally no one cared. So there was this moment where I was like, okay, I'm spending lots of time. I need to, this is not working. So then there's mainstream pornography companies coming into your DMs, into my DMs, saying like, hey, do you want to work with us? Colleagues of mine, women, advised me, saying like, hey, if you do that, then you'll have more reach. Your name is more known, and then you can get more subscribers. So that's what I did. So at the beginning, I thought I'm in control. I decide what to do. But then when you spend so much time and you're hoping to make more than $100 or $200 a month on this site, if there's a chance to make more, if there's a company that's like, hey, if you come here, then you'll make more, I did that. I did that. So it wasn't only OnlyFans, it was suddenly mainstream pornography, with sleazy old men. And we all know, or it's known, that the most amount women, or the average amount that women make on OnlyFans and on these other platforms and on webcam sites is around $100, $200. And during COVID, when there was a whole rush of women coming onto this platform, this created the possibility for agencies, so-called agencies that are taking over your account and basically just doing the advertisement, the uploading, contact with the clients. But they also obviously take money for that. So during COVID times was, for me, the only time that I made a lot of money in my, for my, even in my previous time, because I worked with these digital pimps. So there's just a couple of more things. The pernicious thing about these websites, these digital exploitation websites, is that they have minimum payouts. For example, that means when I left the industry, there was not only one, there were several sites where I never reached the minimum payout. So imagine how many women there are. They have hopes, they get on these platforms, and then they never make it over, say, $100, $200 to get the payout, and then they leave. So I left and I gave lots of companies the money that I couldn't get paid out because it was just not reaching the maximum. The rise of social media and the objectification, the self-objectification that's normalized through social media creates a perfect, the perfect way for women who are desperate, for women who just want to make better for themselves to get on these platforms. And I think this is really, really harmful. Again, because it's said that you are in control, but as I said, the clients, the industry has already set the niches, the look, the boxes for you. And in that way, it affects all women, because this propaganda, this advertisement, this marketing can lead desperate women into this situation. And nobody prepares any woman for the hatred, the boundary crossing, the contempt of men that subscribe or purchase the subscriptions. No one could have prepared me for the messages that I was going to get of men, unasked for, explaining or talking about pedophilia, talking about how much they hate their partner that lies right next to them, and that it is so much better to be talking to me. No one could have prepared me for the, just pure hatred that men show when you don't do what they want you to do. No one could have prepared me for, and no one is being told about the masses of websites where men share stolen, leaked material of women that are being exploited through the digital sexual exploitation industries. No one prepares you for the websites that rate you, that comment, that degrade you just for being a woman exploited through this system. And so it affects us all, and I wish to warn anyone, any woman, especially women that are desperate, that obviously this is never going to be a way out. I will forever be haunted by the material that I'm not able to get off the internet. There's moments where I sit on the bus, on the train, where a man looks too long at me and I'm like, oh my God, he knows. So yeah, that's all I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Roxy, for sharing that. Before I start, I want to explain that what I'm going to read is not my own experience. It is the experience and words of another woman. Her name is Mila. I am reading it for her because identifying yourself as someone who's been involved in the sexploitation industry can have a real negative impact on your life for years and even decades to come, as we heard from Fiona and from Roxy. So this is what Mila says. When I first set up an account on Seeking Arrangement, I was 16 years old, broke and bored. I was a virgin. Never in my wildest dreams did I anticipate that soon I would be knocking on the hotel room doors of total strangers to sell my body. But first, I want to explain how the websites that groomed me actually work. Brandon Wade, a Singaporean American tech entrepreneur, who once stated in a CNN article that love is for poor people, founded 2 sugar daddy websites, Seeking Arrangement, now rebranded as Seeking, and What's Your Price? On both websites, so-called sugar daddies have to pay to set up an account, and sugar babies can join for free. Seeking is geared towards longer-term arrangements in which young women provide sex and companionship in return for either a pay-per-meet fee or a monthly allowance. Some men were uncomfortable paying and promised gifts, nice dinners, and luxury getaways instead. Within minutes of setting up my profile, my inbox was flooded by men detailing how much they were willing to pay, how often, and how they wanted the meetings to play out. Some men would want to go on dates before having sex. Others wanted to meet in their hotel room and fuck you straight off the bat. I was inundated with offers of travel, professional development, and shopping, allowances ranging from £100 to £1,500 per meet, or £300 to £3,000 monthly. What's Your Price functions as an auction site for dates. The first point of communication is a proposed figure. Men send offers to women of how much they're willing to pay for a date, and women send requests of how much they're expecting to be paid. Bids typically range from £40 to £200 per date, and users can send follow-up offers and negotiate the fee. After an offer is accepted, men have to pay the site to chat to the girls. The charge is a percentage of the money agreed for the date. It's generally understood that this fee is for a non-intimate meeting, usually dinner or drinks, and that a larger pay-per-meet allowance would be provided for intimate meetings. That said, a lot of men weren't happy with the lack of sex and would be pushy, despite being unwilling to pay more. I was introduced to this world by a girl I sat next to in English. I set up an account mainly out of curiosity. I started out on Seeking Arrangement, but learned quickly from my first meetings and the messages flooding my inbox that it would be difficult for me to make money without sleeping with these guys. So when I noticed an advert reading, "Want to get paid for dates," I turned to What's Your Price. It was on What's Your Price that I got the hang of it. I met men at least once a week and was paid cash in hand at the end of dinner or drinks. I learned the easiest way to wriggle out of their sexual advances was to say something like, "Oh, I'd love to. I really like you, but my parents are expecting me back and they're really strict." I'd entertain men for as many dates as I could before it became impossible to avoid shagging them, at which point I'd make up an excuse to cut ties, usually that my parents had discovered what I was doing, which was impossible for them to argue with. Soon enough, I was making several £100s monthly from paid dates, none of whom I was sleeping with. I had a spate of bad experiences, mostly men who refused to pay at the end of a date, or men who were threateningly pushy about the sex. But it didn't put me off. The cash was too seductive. I even turned some of my teenage friends onto the sites, And within a few months, I knew about 10 girls who also had profiles. It became an integral part of our social lives. Often, 2 classmates and myself would organise separate dates at the same time and meet up after to smoke weed we bought with our sugar and cash and discuss how awful and pathetic these men were. We'd also arrange double dates, posing as bisexual couples looking for a 3-way arrangement. Once, my best friend and I made out on a video call to a headmaster of a Manchester girls' secondary school, who'd admitted to us he often fantasised about his students. He rewarded us with a dress each from Zara. It was exciting. We'd get dressed up together, we'd have food and drink in amazing bars and restaurants, and make enough money to buy clothes or cigarettes or ecstasy for our next rave. Suddenly, the money woes that had inhibited our shared social lives no longer existed, and we were able to afford to go out and do things together without having to save up pocket money or work long hours at grueling jobs for minimum wage. We framed the buy-in of our time as fucking the patriarchy. These disgusting men were fools, and we were exploiting them by playing to their creepy tendencies. The longer I spent on these sites, the more my judgment was clouded by the monetary offers. I met a few men I thought reasonably attractive and enjoyable to be around, so I slept with them. I was a teenager, suffering from depression and eating disorders, with self-esteem in the gutter. I was flattered that these older rich men had taken an interest in me. I truly believed that they thought I was beautiful and special, and not just a naive teenager that could stick their dicks in. I would later realise these men were all misogynistic creeps, the worst of them rapists and abusers. But it was easier for me to reframe these experiences as sexy and glamorous and totally consensual, rather than admit to myself that I'd gotten involved in something dark and seedy that I was totally unequipped to deal with. Once I started accepting money from men I wanted to sleep with, it became easier for me to accept offers from men I was less drawn to, thinking only of the money. It was then I began finding myself in dangerous and traumatic situations, some of which led me to self-harm. But the disassociation was in full swing, and for me to allow myself to stop was to accept that I had exploited myself, a reality far too painful for me to digest. But I didn't have to, because the feminism I was exposed to was telling me that selling my body was a form of empowerment, that I was sexually liberated, that capitalising on patriarchal constructs for my own financial gain was the ultimate middle finger to the patriarchy. Clothing brands and pop culture social media pages were posting images of luxury-adorned young women with captions like, "Tag a friend who needs a sugar daddy," or "When he's old, but these nails don't pay for themselves." I felt I was smarter and sexier than other girls who were choosing not to be bought by old men. All this alleged empowerment evaporated into thin air as soon as I was behind a closed door with a man or a couple. Ultimately, I had no say in what would be done to me. A price had been arranged, and I owed them a service. I allowed things to be said and done to me that had never been agreed. I was pressured into receiving acts that hurt and performing acts that made my skin crawl. I was plied with drugs and alcohol, and sometimes berated if I was reluctant to take whatever drug the client was taking, even when I told them I had school the following day. My pay was often docked for saying no. In those situations, moments before I achieved total bodily dissociation, I would feel used and defenceless, scared and worthless. But liberal feminism cleaned the wounds, told me I was liberated, an empowered woman taking charge of her own destiny. And when my desperate, distraught mother discovered what I was doing, it reminded me she was a fusty old swerf who didn't understand modern feminism. The summer before I started university, after the 3rd time she learned that I had not quit like I'd promised, I left my family home and moved into a flat in Covent Garden, rented for me by a client. I am so lucky to come from a comfortable, functional, middle-class family with a mother with real feminist values. Otherwise, I could easily have suffered the sugaring world for much longer and perhaps even joined an escorting agency, as I was considering shortly before I gave up. After that summer in Covent Garden, I went to college outside London, which made sugaring more difficult. I also met my first long-term boyfriend in my halls of residence. Learning what real love, real sex was meant to be like was a huge factor in finally opening my eyes to the horrors I had endured on these sugaring sites. I quit officially when I was 19 after 3 years of quasi-prostitution. Over time, the realities I'd fought so hard to stave off became inescapable. I accepted I'd been manipulated, raped, abused by these men, but what hurt the most was the realization that I'd been groomed by the internet and liberal feminism. I found myself in arguments with friends who'd never had any experience in sex work themselves, being told that my anti-sex work views were whorephobic, problematic, that they were sorry I'd had a bad experience, but I should listen to sex workers and challenge my sex negativity. The girls I knew who I'd introduced to the sites all agreed that it was dangerous, degrading, and the furthest thing from empowering. I suppose the sex workers we were meant to be listening to were the ones who were still involved in the business, the ones who still had to maintain their dissociation and cognitive dissonance the way we had before we exited. I wish I could say I've never looked back, never considered fucking the odd man for cash when I was struggling financially. But the upsetting truth is that once you learn how much money there is to be made from compromising your body and your morals, the temptation will always be lurking somewhere within you. I hope that as I heal from this traumatic episode, as well as my pre-existing mental health issues, the temptation will disappear. I will be experiencing the side effects of sugaring for years to come. It has destroyed my view of aging and the value of beauty and youth, strengthened my depression and eating disorders, and bitterly tainted my view on commitment and relationships. My experiences make me terrified to have children. I can see no way to shield them from the fallout of our porn-sick society, from liberal feminism, from the dark corners of the internet. My parents loved and cared for me so deeply. They educated me and informed my morals the best any parent could. They saw that I was supported and cared for and made it understood that they would always be able to support me financially if I was ever struggling, but still it wasn't enough to protect me. I'm filled with hope, knowing there are people out there aligned or involved with organisations like Nordic Model Now, who are equally disturbed by what is being fed to young women and are helping to combat this insidious and increasingly mainstream narrative that prostitution is a choice. As I look to the future, I find great strength in knowing there are people out there actually listening to sex workers and trying to protect women and girls from the ideology that groomed me into believing I was empowered as a professional sex object. Thanks for listening. Thanks so much, and a huge thank you, obviously, to Mila. Our next speaker is Dr. Gail Dines. Unfortunately, something came up which means that Gail can't be with us today, but she sent a video contribution which we're now going to play. She's hoping to join the Q&A session remotely, so please feel free to send Slido questions for her.
Hello, and thank you for inviting me to this conference. I'm sorry I can't be there in person, but thank you for asking me to talk about pornography and its effects. And I want to discuss today the way in which we have become a pornified society and the way in which pornography has become so violent, and also how it got hijacked by third wave neoliberal feminists, faux feminists, into being seen as sexual empowerment. So I'm going to share my screen. So we're going to be talking today about how pornography, as both a form of production and consumption, is male violence against women. On both ends of the value chain, it causes increased levels of violence, and I'm going to be showing some studies and discussing how this happens. Now, one of the things we know is that people often born pre-pornography era, which is really pre-2000 with the internet, or a lot of women don't know what's going on in the industry. Who seems to be very aware of it and gives a pro-porn discussion all the time is the media. And this is Details magazine, which is actually a kind of cosmopolitan for men. And they had an article called How Internet Porn is Changing Teen Sex. And what they wrote is that there's an entire generation of young people who think sex ends with a money shot to the face. A money shot, if you don't know, is ejaculation on the face, which my students tell me have become increasingly popular for men to want to do. And indeed, studies have found that when they're asked what's the one of the 3 sex acts you really want to do, coming on her face is what is actually mentioned as number 1 or 2. So this is the way in which the porn industry shapes the way in which we think about sexuality, about masculinity, femininity, and about women as a sex class. Because what's happened in this kind of thing is that what they show in the studies is that men like to do this because it gives them a feeling of power over the woman. What we know from studies is that of the 304 scenes analysed, top scenes, 90% contain some form of violence against women. So I have to say, for someone who spends a lot of time on pornography scenes, I have not seen any mainstream pornography website that doesn't end in violence against women. It is the standard way, because pornography is only as good to the degree that you debase and dehumanize her. This is the very core on which pornography is actually based, is the dehumanization of women. And the greater that, the greater the sizzle. So what are the acts that dehumanize and violate women? So let's begin with gagging. This is where the penis is so far down the throat she starts to gag and she can't breathe. And as she's pushing away from him, what he does is he drags her head and pulls it closer to his penis. So she really can't breathe. Tears are streaming down her face, and then sometimes she vomits, and they keep that scene in. So is the guy who's doing this a sociopath? I don't know. We need empirical research. What we do know is he acts like a sociopath, and he's a role model for all those boys and men who are watching pornography and thinking about what it means to be sexual. The second major act is strangulation, which is hands around the throat, not to be confused with gagging. This could be deadly. It can cause a stroke. It can cause a heart attack. And in the long term, it can cause brain damage. A recent study asked young women about their last sexual experience, and what they found was that 1 in 3 during their last sexual experience, not over a lifetime, just 1 in 3, had actually been strangled. Also, rough anal sex. Anal sex that is so pounding that one of the problems is that often the anus drops out of the woman and she has to have her anus sewn up again, which is why so few women last any more than 3 months in the industry. They simply cannot tolerate the violence to the body. Ejaculation on the face, hair pulling, hitting and spitting in the face. So your average porn scene is 1 woman, 2 women, 3 women being orally, vaginally, anally penetrated, being called every name imaginable, having a hair pulled, being spat at, and then ejaculated all over. So this is your average mainstream porn. This is, I'm not by any way going to the dark web, I'm not going into the niche markets, I'm going into the major mainstream porn sites. So I want to talk about how they drag the viewers in, the men. So this is an example from Gag Me and Then Fuck Me. Do you know what we say to things like romance and foreplay? We say fuck off. We take gorgeous young bitches and do what every man would really like to do. Now, we're still not at the point in this porn culture that every man would really like to do, but this is a way that the porn industry grooms men into thinking that to be a male in this culture, these are the kinds of things that you really like to do, even if you don't. If you're young and have no sexual repertoire and you don't know what sex is, this is your introduction, because pornography is the major form of sex ed today for any kid who's got any device. Another example of how they pull them in is from anally ripped whores. We at Pure Filth know exactly what you want. Chicks being ass fucked till their sphincters are pink, puffy and totally blown out. Adult diapers just might be in store for these whores when their work is done. We at Pure Filth know exactly what you want. No, you don't. You don't know that a 9-year-old or 11-year-old, and the average age of viewing pornography first time is between 9 to 11. You don't know they want this. They're not looking for this. They often put things like boobies or butts into Google. They're not looking for this. They are catapulted into a world of sexual violence. And how do they keep them there? Well, we at Pure Filth know what you want. It's as if they're saying, we've got you. You might not know this, but we know exactly who you are. So this is a great way, again, to be grooming the boys and the men into a violent kind of sexuality that is normalised. Now, we know that porn sites get more visitors each month than Netflix, Amazon and Twitter combined. This is not some small industry. This is a massive, multi-billion, above-ground industry that has virtually, very little regulation around it. The actual flagship of this industry is Pornhub. Pornhub is your chic, cutting-edge porn site, and in many cases we've heard from boys that they just see this as another part of social media, not even pornography. So Pornhub has become the established site, but we've got loads of others like Xhamster, YouPorn, but this is really important because of the way it markets itself and brands itself. I also want to talk about OnlyFans, because OnlyFans is becoming more and more popular, and it's another way in which pornography is becoming mainstreamed. So what do we know? OnlyFans was founded in 2016. Now, how do women make monthly subscriptions? They create custom content for fans. They get tips for messaging their fans. So they create, the content is kind of a live stream sex show. There are 187 million users. This is up from 12 million in January, which is profoundly increase. Over 3 million content creators. This is up. Now, by the way, they call them content creators. This is a way to erase the concept of women. It's over 3 million women are on this, mainly women. That's up from 120,000 in 2019. And this is mainly due to COVID, because what we saw is that women lost their jobs, they needed the money, and this promised them huge amounts of money. Well, we'll see just how much they make. The platform takes 20% cut, so it is in fact a pimp platform. And this is exactly where pornography and prostitution meet, because the women are being pimped out by a pimp platform to produce pornography. The average content creator monthly income is $180. So all these articles you read that she gets millions of dollars and puts herself through school is actually a lie. The owner makes $1 million a day. This is probably one of the highest paid pimps in the world. The women are subject to doxing, capping, death threats. Also, they have a referral program. Because they know that women make so little, what they do is they say to women, if you bring in your friends, then we will give you a percentage of what they earn, which means you're not only pimping out women, the women you're pimping out, you're turning into pimps. So it's actually a sort of big scheme here, a pyramid scheme of pimping. And we know that a lot of the women up here who have been on OnlyFans through desperation often have lost their jobs because they've got their digital footprint, and also they get stalked, as they say here, and doxed as well by men who take pictures of what the live sex show and then put them onto Pornhub. So we can see we're dealing with a whole ecosystem of pornography via the internet. So what do we know about the impact of porn on boys and men? We know that the younger and the more you use pornography, 40 years of research tell us that they have a limited capacity for intimacy. They're more likely to use coercive tactics, including sexting. They've got increased engagement in risky sexual behaviour, increased likelihood of perpetuating sexual harassment and rape, increased anxiety and depression, habitual and addictive use, and erectile dysfunction. So basically, we are socialising a generation of men and boys into becoming rapists and sexual harassers, as well as all these things. We also know that high school boys who are frequent users of porn are more likely to buy sex than those who are not. So we're also turning them into Johns as well. So this pornography is a major driver to buying sex and to the trafficking industry. We know that boys exposed to porn are 3.3 times more likely to engage in problematic sexual behaviours. Boys who intentionally sought out porn are 6 times more likely to self-report aggressive behaviour, and this was a causal study, not correlational, which is the gold standard for social science, all sciences in fact. A meta-analysis of longitudinal studies shows that boys exposed to porn are more likely to sexually harass. Nearly 70% of boys who frequently or daily use porn reported that porn made them want to try out what they'd seen. So when anyone argues that there's no evidence that porn causes violence against women and children, basically it's either a willful refusal to acknowledge what's going on, or they simply don't know, or they're lying. But we have more than 40 years of research in the last 20 years since the internet became the major way that boys and men got their porn. We know without a doubt that we are shaping a whole generation, not just individuals, but a whole generation of boys to see themselves that masculinity as a sex class is about violence against women. It's about power over women, and that pornography weaponizes sex as a form of power. And then we kind of go a little bit down a rabbit hole here. Because when we look at what's going on, we find that there's so much content that men get bored and they're always looking for new niche markets. What are these new niche markets? Well, from this study, what we find is that clinical experience and research evidence now accumulating to suggest that the internet is not drawing attention to those is not simply drawing attention to those with existing pedophilic interests, but is contributing to the crystallization of those interests in people, men, with no sexually explicit interest in children. What this is saying is that men who are not pedophiles, but who are bored and who use pornography a lot, are looking for something new. And that new is child sexual abuse images. So we're expanding the group of men who are a danger to children, and we're expanding the group of children who are at risk from being raped by not only pedophiles, but non-pedophile men. So here's it in an image. Desensitization due to huge amounts of pornography leads to boredom, that can lead to addiction, that then leads to what's called legal childified images. And these would be the barely legal sites or babysitter sites or teen porn sites that you find all over Pornhub, Xporn, etc. And then that leads to legal childified images that go through to child sexual abuse images, the actual real thing. And in fact, I interviewed 8 men in a state prison, and this was where they all went. They were all porn addicts. They'd all got their feet wet using Pornhub images of childified images, and then they were actually ended up with child sexual abuse images. They were in prison for downloading child sexual abuse images and then raping a child. And the average time between first looking at the child abuse image and then sexual child abuse image, and then raping a child was between 6 to 12 months. So now we are creating a much more dangerous situation. So the question is, how do we do to clear our toxic culture? We're letting kids develop into a culture that is fully pornified, and each day, and with artificial intelligence, we're seeing more and more pornographic images to the point that it is the landscape and the wallpaper of our kids and men's lives. So we have to first of all fight back against the industry, and especially the pro-porn shills. Now, especially neoliberal feminism. So when I joined feminism, we never talked about individual empowerment. We always talked about liberation. But what's happened has been a shift away from the notion that feminism is about sisterhood, so that even if I'm okay and you're not, I will do whatever it takes to make this world a place where you can live. And this is not what's happened. Now we are down to this notion that if you are doing fine, then screw you, because I've got no interest in you. So as porn becomes more mainstream, what we find is mainstream feminism becomes more pornified. So this is quite a bizarre situation we're in, that we're dealing with much greater porn onslaught, and at the same time, the so-called third wave or faux feminism are now making pornography seem more part of the mainstream. We used to have wonderful books out there that really made it clear from a radical feminist perspective what was going on. There's Andrea Dworkin, Susan Griffith, we had Not for Sale, we had Take Back the Night. We had these great books which made absolutely clear that pornography is a form of violence against women, both at the form of production and at consumption. And then we went down a bizarre rabbit hole, which, I mean, this is like happened years ago, and I'm still reeling that we ended up down this rabbit hole. So now we have books like Bound and Gagged, Hardcore, Defending Pornography by Nadine Strossen, who's from the American Civil Liberties Association, which basically suggests that pornography is a way for women to find their sexuality. It's a way for women to finally become liberated from patriarchy, which again is almost impossible to believe, because nothing speaks to patriarchy more than pornography. It is the propaganda piece of patriarchy. It is the way that they deliver misogyny to men's brains via the penis, an extremely powerful delivery system. And did you ever think you would live to see these words put together, the feminist porn book? Because I certainly didn't. And now this is how it's advertised on Amazon. The feminist porn book identifies the importance of pornography as a form of expression and labour in which women and other minorities produce power and pleasure. What does this mean? What it means is that actually the power and pleasure is produced for men, not for the women who are in pornography. This is completely upside down. But this is the kind of books we now have out there. These are the kind of books that are being taught in women's studies classes. And what we find is if you go on to actual Google Scholar and you put in pornography, a lot of the first pages are actually full of the pro-porn position. So when you think of all the students going through universities who are being taught how being pro-pornography is a form of sexual liberation, we get to see why this is no longer front and center of a feminist movement. So this is the open society. Sex work, of course, a term I would never use, is a consensual transaction between adults where the act of selling or buying sexual service is not a violation of human rights. Well, actually it is. It is a violation of women's human rights. But this is becoming, again, the mainstream position that somehow it's a consensual transaction where she just decides one day she'll go into sex work, i.e. be prostituted, and he's just doing a transactional, no violence, no power differential, it's just between two adults. So we can see again how the issue of prostitution and trafficking has been reduced to this neoliberal approach of just between two individual adults without any power structure. Porn and prostitution are not considered violence against women because the view is that women consent. However, what is consent in a patriarchal society when women and girls are groomed into thinking of themselves as hypersex objects? This is the way in which, when they start to look around to see what it means to be female, they are overwhelmed with hypersexualized images. Now, Neil Postman, the media scholar, once said that when we lived in a print-based culture, we developed some immunization to the seduction of eloquence of the printed word, to which I would add, we have developed no such eloquence to the seduction of immunization to the eloquence of the image. Images bypass the frontal part of the brain, and if you see the ongoing hypersexualized images, not just in pornography, but in ads, in music videos, in movies, these girls are being trained to think of themselves as Joanna Angel once put it, porn ready. She's a pornographer. I almost said feminist pornographer. You see how much it's drilled into me? No such thing as a feminist pornographer. You're either feminist or you're a pornographer. You can't be both, because the first rule of feminism is that you do no harm to women. So Joanna Angel said that the girls come to the set porn ready. What she means is not all girls are going to end up on a porn set. She means, more importantly, that girls are being socialized into seeing themselves as these disposable sex objects which men can use, abuse, and walk away from. Now, women consent under conditions of constraint. And these constraints are poverty, racism, histories of sexual abuse, histories of substance abuse, being pimped out, and the grooming of women and girls, as I just said, in patriarchy, into consenting, which is really a compliant victim. One of those men I interviewed in the prison, he was talking about, and he used this word, how he groomed his 10-year-old stepdaughter, who he then went on to rape. And he said the culture did a lot of the grooming for me. He understood in a really profound way exactly what the pornographer Joanna Angel understood, which is that our culture, with its hypersexualized imagery and pornography, is grooming our kids on a macro scale. So now we don't have just individual groomers grooming our kids on a micro scale. We have mass groomers, the culture, grooming our kids en masse, getting ready for what's going to come at them, the girls, when they meet these boys who've been groomed by the porn industry. Now, when you say consent, what is a consent contract? Because in pornography, they just sign on the dotted line. But let's just look what they're really signing to, which is not in the informed consent, because there's no such contract in pornography. It's, do you agree to losing control of the most intimate images of your body? You agree to being limited to no recourse to have your images removed, your body exposed to millions of porn users who will view you as a slut or a whore or worse, being attacked on social media by the porn industry and porn users if you try to sue or speak out against the porn industry, living in fear that your loved ones, including your children, will see the images, as well as future employers, your neighbors. This is what it looks like in pornography, that you never ever get out of pornography, even if you leave the industry, because your images are up there forever. And this causes even more PTSD when you know that your images are there forever. And also, they don't consent to this. This is from the AIM, which was a volunteer organization that did testing on women in pornography. And look what they're saying you can get: rectal chlamydia, gonorrhea of the throat, gonorrhea of the anus, all of these things that you can get in pornography. This is not the job description I know for any other fields. So what you're seeing here, very importantly, is that young women who are being groomed by the culture and often pimped into pornography do not get to consent under conditions of their own making, but under conditions that are external to them. So the question is, what do we really want? Well, people often say you've got a pie, okay? And this pie is called patriarchy, and men have most of the pie. And women want half the pie. No, we don't want half the pie. First of all, it's extremely unappetizing, right? And secondly, that's not what we want. And we certainly don't want the crumbs. So what we want is to deconstruct the apple pie. We want a whole new system whereby we get rid of the sex industry through tying it down by regulation, by activism, by organising, by raising awareness. This is what we need to do in order to change the culture. So conscious raise, organise, speak truth to power, refuse to let the faux feminists control the narrative, refuse to collaborate with patriarchy, sue the hell out of the porn industry for all the violence it's done to women, and that means through civil litigation. Misbehave in the most unladylike ways, because we know that well-behaved women rarely make history or herstory, and define porn as film prostitution to expand the Nordic model. We have an excellent law in many countries, the Nordic model. All we have to do is define porn as film prostitution and add it on to the Nordic model. We owe it to our foremothers, our sisters and our daughters, and we also owe it to our sons, actually, because the porn industry sees them as nothing more than life support systems for erect penises. This is what we have to do. We have to fight back in no uncertain terms. Got to share my screen. And we need to absolutely get hold of the narrative from the pro-porn so-called feminists and to start building a movement again that puts violence against women through the sex industry at the center of it. Because as long as we have a sex industry, as long as we have pornography and prostitution and strip clubs, women will always be an oppressed sex class. You cannot have women as an equal sex class in an industry, in a world where the major industries are denying them the right to actual full liberation. So again, thank you for listening to this. I'll be here for the Q&A. I hope you're having a good conference, and I hope you take something away from this, that the most important thing to do is we fight back, because I don't know about you, but I have absolutely had enough. Thank you.
Wow. Very informative, quite harrowing. Yeah. It's time for the Q&A. I just want to say it is emotive. We just want to be respectful of each other, please. We've got some questions on Slido, and we're going to have roving mics. We've got two women with the mics in their hand. They'll be coming round. Just pop your hands up. Panellists, if you come up, please. Right. I'll start off with a Slido question.
Sorry, can I just say?
Yes.
I normally speak on women-only panels, and I feel like I really fluffed this morning because there was a man sat next to me. And, you know, maybe you're one of them nice men, but that's the damage. That's the damage. I've spoken for years. I'm knackered with it all. I'm devastated for girls and young women in our communities, but I just wanted to say I really fluffed. But anyway.
Actually, Fiona, you didn't. You're amazing. Okay? You didn't fluff. Don't apologise, really, you don't need to. Anyway, are you ready for a question, Fiona? Do you need a... Yeah, all right. So you're not going to fluff this one, are you? No. Okay, this is from Slido. Fiona, how do we raise happy and healthy girls in a pornified culture? Keep it brief.
Well, we're managing it at Build a Girl. Like I said, we're only a really small organisation. I recruit volunteers and train them. They have to adhere to radical feminism in every aspect of their lives, or they're not on my gang, they're not in the gang. They're a safe space, and that they matter. You know, these kids come in absolutely shattered and devastated by male violence. As I said, as young as 6, I've worked with girls, and just seeing them smile and achieve because they've just been able to be a girl, and in and amongst other girls who are rooting for them, who are not, you know, being nasty. We have a code of conduct. We just offer a safe female-only space, and we listen and we tell them they matter. And they're all choosing university and college, and you know, going on to be fantastic young women. So, and come back and do peer. A lot of the volunteers as well are peer. They've already been to Build a Girl. So I can't answer questions shortly. I'm really sorry.
Thank you. Okay, roving mics, if you've got a question, just put your hand up, please. I can't see very well from here.
Hi everybody, thank you so much for the talk. My name is Zarina Macha, and I would like to ask the panel, what is your thoughts on domestic violence against men and boys? Because I believe in the 1970s, a lady named Erin Pitsey found that domestic violence affects men and boys just as much as women, and we don't really seem to hear much on the conversation.
Okay, I'll just interject there. Yes, I do agree with you. There are domestic violence against men and boys, but this conference, we're mainly focusing on females, women and girls, where majority of the domestic violence and prostitution and pornography culture applies to. We know that it does happen to the males, but our focus today is the female aspect, which is the majority. Okay.
Well, the reason why I ask actually is because
three women a week are killed.
Right,
Three
just
women
could
a
we
week
move on?
I'll explain why I'm asking, because
Not
if we
men.
want to be committed to true gender equality, then surely we should be looking at domestic
Okay,
violence.
could
how
we
it
take
affects
the mic, please? Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to go on to the Slido question right now. No, that's fair enough, but we're focusing on the women and girls. That's okay, but we're focusing on women and girls right now, and it's fine to have that question, but we're going to move on. Okay, so let's just have a quiet now, please. We've had that kerfuffle, fine. We're going to calm down, and we're going to get on with it, because we don't have much time, and these people, the panellists, have given their time. You bought tickets. We need to get on with it. Okay, so Roxy, I've got a question from Slido. Why do you think so many women accept this trend and pornify themselves online?
Well, I think I'll just, refer to Gail Dines. It's the culture. It's, it's everywhere. Like, it's literally everywhere. I'm born 89, so I was already influenced by this. And again, the women that I met, the friends that I had in the industry, so many of them, so many of us, connected through our similar experiences of abuse and at least now I'm getting paid for it. Literally, this is it. And again, there's a girl in every class. There's a girl in every class. And what are they going to do? If this is what they are surrounded with, if there's this industry that says you can sell yourself whatever way you like, there is a place for you. If you're fat, if you're whatever race, whatever look you have, you will make money. And if you are desperate, if there's not enough job opportunities, if there's not enough well-paid job opportunities for women, which is one of the things that I still find is lacking in every single country that has the Nordic model. We need better pay for jobs that women are usually taking, you know? So I think this is it. It's the lack of opportunities. It's also the grooming of our society and the normalization of sexual violence as, you know, women being strong, enduring this kind of stuff. This is literally what I've done. I have just endured, and I was proud of enduring shit. I was proud of it.
Thank you, Roxy. Okay. Right, where's the roving mic? Can you put your hand up if you've got a question, please?
I just wanted to say you talked about OnlyFans earlier, and I just wondered if people knew that there are now billboard ads for OnlyFans. So I live in Tottenham in North London, and we recently had a big billboard ad with a particular OnlyFans performer, and I saw it when I was sitting on the bus, and a young lady in front of me, about 14 years old, was just shocked. She just, you know, and then she started writing on her phone to somebody that it's on a big billboard, and like, you know, she was shocked. And I'm postmenopausal, you know, I'm invisible now, but she's not. And I just wondered if people know about this. I've written to the Advertising Standards Authority, but they only had 11 objections, and I just wondered if people knew about this, and, you know, just to make you aware. But the other thing to say is that I care about boys. I think we all care about boys, but we saw some data earlier that the vast majority of these cases harm women and girls. And actually boys are harmed by porn. And I've heard a boy, for example, say, oh, does a money shot, you know, what's wrong with that? Why is that a problem? So we're also talking about that as well, I think. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't think anybody would deny boys are significantly harmed, but men need to organise men-only space and deal with it and work with men.
Maybe that's a question for Michael. The original question was about the domestic abuse and violence against boys and girls. I think this is more about a question about children, boys, accessing pornography, which is slightly different. So, Michael, would you have anything to say about that?
Yeah, well, is it on? Is this thing on? Okay. There is, in the science, there's a thing called the erotic template where children learn in adolescence and pre-adolescence what sex is, what intimacy is, how sex works, what sex is all about. And I think there's a lot of evidence now that children's, and in this case boys' erotic templates are being distorted by their unfettered access to pornographic material. And that is a problem. Whether it leads them to causing problems to others, girls and women, when they're men, or just struggling themselves with their own kind of sexual identity and what sex is and how terrifying it appears to be. You know, if you're not strangling someone, this is really bizarre stuff. Just on the OnlyFans point, that you need to be aware of the thing that I demand I said it first, something called porn washing, where the pornographic industry allies itself with child protection and says, oh, well, yeah, we're the pornographic industry. We don't like that child abuse stuff, but we're just entertainers. And they kind of lend their sites to sort of offering warning pages and advices to people. Don't look at child abuse material, just look at our stuff. Aren't we wonderful? And I think that's an interesting danger. And child protection organisations and IWF and so forth are really struggling as to whether they should engage with these people or try to close them down. You know, should we declare war on them, or should we try to ally ourselves with them to keep the pornography nice? You'll know my view, but I mean that's a debate that's around in the kind of issues around trying to prevent access to child abuse material, and I'm calling it porn washing. That they're not as nice as they like to present.
Okay, thank
Could I just say one more thing to the boys and stuff? I think they all know. They know it's wrong. They even have terms for it. They call it post-nut clarity, which is when they have to quickly close their laptop because they know they're filled with shame and with guilt, and they know that what they're watching is abusive and exploitative. They know.
Okay, I think there was a lady down there.
Hi there, I'm an auntie to a 13-year-old boy and a 10-year-old little girl. I'm not their mother. I'm a radical feminist, obviously. Is there one piece of advice that each of you could give me on how to talk to them in a kind of open way? I've kind of mentioned, look, be careful, there's perverts there. I've tried to make it comical, you know, like the crazy auntie. Their mother is a good mother, but obviously busy and quite woke and, you know, oh, you're uptight. I'm a bit of a bigot because I don't believe men can be women, okay? So what piece of advice could you give me, or what kind of angle do you think I could speak to these kids that I adore and I'm really worried about? Thank you.
Can I just...
Of course
I
you
have
can.
a son. He's nearly 27. I've told him from a very young age that the thing attached to him belongs to him. He's responsible for it. Never mind telling me, oh, but Mum, I couldn't control myself. Right from a young age, that has been the conversation. And I suppose for me, because I'm a survivor and I'm outspoken and public, I had to have very difficult conversations with my child at an age I would have preferred not to, because I was terrified other people were going to say, well, they did say things to him. You know, a prostitute daubed on my wall and dog shit through the letterbox, and a gang of 15-year-olds surrounded us when he were tiny and got the cocks out and asked me to suck the cocks for rocks. So he were sadly exposed to stuff that was shocking. But I talked to him, I talked frankly, because at school the sex education is deviance and sexual fetish and pornified education, often coming from outside organisations. They don't talk about healthy relationships, they don't talk about the harms of porn. So I had them conversations. But he did go to a house once and he phoned me up and said, you need to come and get me because there's a lad, the lad he went to visit had porn all over his bedroom, and Mum told me I were mad. There was something wrong with me. So, yeah, it's a tough one, but you've just got to have them difficult conversations. You can't wait till it's too late.
Yeah. I would say for boys or just anyone, I think it's really important to question or ask, you know, or just make them aware that the material that they will see, they cannot ever be sure that the woman really, you know, consented, because she can't. Like, you can explain that once a camera is rolling, the woman is being filmed into her, like her face is filmed, like the focus is on her. So how can anyone ever know if that woman isn't trafficked in the most horrifying way and just enduring stuff? I went to schools. These teenagers were a bit older. The boys, after my talk, were trying to find, like, you know, like, but the men, they, you know, the porn performers and stuff, like, they have it good. And I was just really, really blunt and said, none of that is even like humanly possible. A lot of the men in the porn industry are heavily dependent on Viagra and all of these kind of things. These actually go onto your respiratory system, and so the porn industry now relies on injections directly into the penis. I said that to a group of, like, you know, a class of like 14-year-olds. Men are injecting, they are asked to inject a penis with some hard medication that manually just keeps up their penis in order for them to do the most horrifying acts. Men are being cast for the penis size these days. Even younger men, you know, like men that look like teenagers are being, you know, recruited in the last, I'd say, like 5 to 7 years. They have to, it's in their contracts that they have to use this medication. It's called Caverject, and they inject it into their penises. Like, this is not normal. None of this is normal. It's not healthy for the performers in the mainstream industry. And since the the amateur industry is now kind of crossing over. It's, you know, men are easily getting into OnlyFans and or mainstream. This is what's happening. This doesn't provide any basis for like a healthy intimacy for anyone. Yeah.
Thank you. We are running short of time, so I've got to wrap it up there. I just want to say thank you to the panel. Thank you for Natalie as well for speaking Mila's words. I know it's hard to listen to, very hard, but so important. And thank you, Michael, for all that information. Just to say, before we all leave, I've got a few bits of information. We've got in Holborn, there's lots of cafes. We've got a little garden square. You can take your packed lunch, or you can eat your packed lunch here. You've got stalls outside. Please take a look at the stalls, especially the Nordic Model Now. I just want to point out, we've got a few booklets here. Now, this is supporting students impacted by the sex industry. If you work with young people, young adults in universities, please have a look at that. It's got a lot of information in there that will help. So it is essential reading. Please use it to discuss it with colleagues at universities. If you're watching on the live stream, we are closing this one very soon, and the new one will begin at 1:55 promptly. Could I please ask if you could all be seated just before 1:55 so we can start promptly, because we've got I'd like to make more of the question and answer session, so we can get through it. We were a little bit behind today. So thank you everyone, and hopefully take a deep breath and we'll get ready for the afternoon session.